devices. I don't have them on right now, but I like to know where they are. And I'm like, okay, where the heck did I leave those things? I have a tendency of setting them down and never in the same place and never really remembering why I put them or where I put them. All right, looks like YouTube is live. I'm going to go ahead and pause that and hide that from myself. And what time are we? 7:02. We'll be starting in just a minute or two here. Mike, what did you hear about in the Senate today?
Somebody posted that Hembry had stumped the first reading of the cannabis bill. I didn't get to watch it on TV, but did you watch any of today's proceedings?
I did, but I thought he did that yesterday.
Maybe I'm reading a days off. Okay.
And what happened yesterday is I think there were so many people on that I'd get like 2 or 3 seconds of video and then I'd get a spin for like 5 seconds and then, a couple more seconds of video. And so I ended up downloading it, but I haven't watched it to see exactly what happened. But yes, that's pretty much what happened. Well, we'll get into it in just a second here.
All right, cool. I just want to talk before we went on live, and that way I don't screw anybody over.
Yep, cool. Not a problem. Let me just go find my little document here that I always like to read. There it is. And I am getting some text messages. I think somebody's having trouble getting on here. Excuse me. Bear with me a moment, folks.
Scott, our hope is not lost, is it?
I'm feeling kind of hopeless at the moment. Okay, I got that message out there. We are at 7:04. Let me go ahead and get things started, and then we will address your question, Joey, and all the questions we kind of have. And you're not the only one with questions. I have questions myself. But my name is Scott Weldon. I'm the executive director of South Carolina NORML, the state chapter for the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. All of our meetings are an environment of education and awareness and not an open market for the sale, purchase, or distribution of cannabis. We do not encourage or condone illegal behavior of any kind. All right. Let me go ahead and close that little document up and out of the way. What the? Oh, I got some kind of loud truck driving by. All right, we'll close that up. All right. As I usually do, I want to start by welcoming everybody who's here with us on the Zoom call. Anybody who might be watching us live on our live stream to YouTube. And also hi to anybody who's watching this as a recording later on. With that in mind, if you are watching on YouTube live stream, we are not monitoring it. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them in the comments. And we'll try and address them at a later time, but we will not be addressing them live tonight. I live on a somewhat loud, busy road. Oh my goodness. All right. Where was I? Welcoming everybody. I told you who I am. This is the South Carolina Cannabis Conversation. Happens pretty much every Wednesday at 7 p.m. And tonight we are talking about what the heck's going on in the Senate with the Compassionate Care Act S-150. And Joey, I think your question was, Josh Griffin running for governor. I'd love to see a new governor in place. Um, Joey asked, I think a moment ago, is all hope lost? What's going on? And my understanding of it. Now I'm going to do a real quick screen share here. I say quick. My computer says otherwise. All right. There's a lot of information you can usually find on scstatehouse.gov. This is Rule 32, Order of Business. And down here under Section B, Contested Calendar. This is really about the most informative, I think, piece I've found so far. I was trying to do some other searching and looking at this here. And while I was watching today's proceedings, because I saw it was on the calendar, mistakenly, it wasn't actually something that was active on the calendar. I didn't read all the way through it. But I got to this where there is a contested and uncontested, and they were going through today all these different uncontested items and scheduling them onto the, getting them onto the Senate schedule. The problem with this is, let me go ahead and find the chat again. Oops. There it is. What was the guy's name? Humry in Myrtle Beach, the senator up in Myrtle Beach who put the kibosh on it. Basically, he contested it, preventing any discussion to even be made or going forward with it. Moving it from the uncontested calendar to the contested calendar. With that, there's this, whatever this is. Let me see if I can change my button here. Boom. There we go. I don't know what kind of devices you're on, so I'm going to try and make this a little bit bigger here. And so on any legislative date, a senator may move no more than 5 bills or resolutions from the uncontested statewide calendar to the contested statewide calendar, and each such rule or resolution shall have a notation on the Senate calendar stating the name of the senator who contests the bill or resolution, which is what I had not noticed earlier on the page. So we'll go ahead and look at that. Is this where I want to go? Calendars. Now you have to kind of go down a little bit. Oh, I got this pretty big on this page too, don't I? It was page, I believe, 16 or 17. And there we go. Page 17, S150. And what I missed on there was extended on to page 18. Contested by Senator Humphrey. So now it's been moved to the contested calendar. And now it must sit there for a minimum of 6 statewide legislative days. Am I reading that right? During the motion period, a motion be made by the chairman of the Rules Committee to call any bill or resolution which has been on the calendar for a minimum of 6 days statewide, 6 statewide legislative days from the contested calendar. Now, this happened on what date? Yesterday? And 6 days from there is going to put us past the Friday deadline for the crossover deadline. Um, I don't see it any other way. I still do see some of the other advocacy groups saying contact your legislator. Um, Now, I do want to go down to this third paragraph. However, in the final 2 weeks before the Sendai adjournment, which I'm not sure what that is, a bill or resolution which is on the calendar may be called from the contested calendar by the Rules Committee upon the majority vote of the committee and shall be considered in the ordinary course of business. So now, the Rules Committee, which I don't have a link to at the moment, um, if a majority of the Rules Committee uh, so decides, they could vote to call this from the contested calendar, and then it would proceed and be, course of business after special orders, ordinary course of business after special orders. Um, I have Joshua over here asking me in chat, how do we not have the votes to push it through? Uh, I'm not sure we have the votes, just because there's a number of senators that are using the excuse that it's not FDA approved. Um, there's um, the conservative lean of both houses in our legislature and our governor and the well, I want to say the top cop. Top cop in my mind is actually Attorney General Alan Wilson. The second top or uniformed cop would then be Chief Keel. Um, and none of them are supporting or endorsing this legislation. So even if it got through the Senate and got through the House, I think it would squeak by, and and I don't know if we'd have the votes to overcome a veto if the governor said he wasn't going to sign it and vetoed it, which is what I see McMaster doing. Uh,
Hey, can I add in there something? So you're talking about the Rules Committee has to have a majority. I don't know all the senators by name, but Greg Hembry's on this frickin' committee. So I'm sure that's going to have a lot to play on whether it gets out or not.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Like I said, I didn't have a link to the committee at the moment and who's on the rules committee. Um, and that may be their way of knocking us out this session. I don't know what that does to it as far as for the second half of the session starting next January. Uh, I'm assuming that it can be resubmitted at that point if it's considered dead now. Um, but my guess is it would end up going back to the Medical Affairs Committee and the same crew we had before. Yeah, and as all of you know, we have a couple of very unfriendly senators on that committee as well. Excuse me.
Sorry.
Sorry about that. Unless any of you have any other insight for me, that's kind of the way I'm seeing it right now. Is that we're kind of up that creek, ain't got no paddle. As far as the Compassionate Care Act goes, like I say, Friday, actually Saturday technically, is the crossover deadline. Um, I'm going to quick go look at the Rules Committee link, if y'all don't mind bearing with me here.
Okay. Good hanging.
Boy, I love Google. I can find me almost anything.
Mhm.
Let's see if I can shrink that back a little. All right. Well, okay. Yes, Humbry is on that committee. And I'm not, I mean, I think Kimpson's a supporter. I'd have to go through the list and kind of compare it to the bill, see if any of these are supporters. Um, that's going to be a tough call. Let's go ahead and look at that real quick. I said, let's go see that real quick. I said to the computer. Let's try that again. Yeah, my internet connection is not the only thing unstable around here. All right, here we should. Come on, unstable internet, let's go. Leatherman and Grooms are also on that committee. So let's see if I can split these so I can see them both at the same time. All right. You guys still with me? Cool. What did I say? We have Grooms, we have Kimpson, we have McLeod, Shealy. 1, 2, 3, 4. Did I see Goldfinch up there? No. Unless I'm missing, I'm seeing 4 that are co-sponsors of the bill. That doesn't say how many others may be in favor of the bill versus how many are not in favor. Um, uh, but now that we're at this point, I think the only chance we have, and that would be starting today, tonight, hammer hard tomorrow, see if we can hammer the rules committee. And that's probably our only chance of getting this to move forward either tomorrow and or Friday. Friday being our absolutely last chance. That doesn't mean that it wouldn't get tied up even on Friday. And this is for what, second reading or second reading. And there's still the need to move to third reading. I believe that's a need. I'm not sure if they can go ahead and pull on it right away on second reading. But that's kind of where I'm thinking if we have any hope is to nail this the Senate's Rules Committee. I don't have that specific list in our database. Or I would kind of get that up and running. So I'm just going to kind of ask you to, as you go, click on them, find their contact. Usually it's to send a message here. Um, and what I do a lot of times, I'll create things in a separate document, a Word document. Actually, I use text edit in my on my Mac, and it's just real quick. Just throw some text together for the letter, copy, and then paste it into each one of these. Um, Hopefully, making sure I make the appropriate changes and don't and correct the names and all that kind of stuff. Made a couple mistakes in copying and pasting over my lifetime with that, so just kind of a warning. Um, anyway, that's my share on that. Do y'all want me to? I'll drop the link to the rules committee here in the chat. Go ahead and make sure you kind of copy that one. Um, but again, Google's real easy. You just kind of type in SC Senate Rules Committee. Boom, there it is right on the top. I'm going to go up. I forgot I'm not sharing these anymore. Let me go ahead and back out a couple of my other things there. All right. We're only about 20 minutes into the conversation. Does anybody have any thoughts or insight or comments on S-150 and where we are with that? All right. Well, who wants to join me in just throwing my hands up in frustration at our freaking Senate? Throw my hands up in the air. So that's kind of what I'm going to come to my second portion of the evening. Um, and that's kind of to talk about where I think we need to go as advocates, as voters here in South Carolina. Some of you may or may not agree with me on this, but I see a real struggle with having both a Republican controlled House and Senate. I don't know if that'll really ever be a reality in trying to shift that. I highly doubt it. And that's why I'm thankful that we at least have a Republican, two Republican senators pushing at least some medical marijuana legislation in both Tom Davis and Herb Kurzman sharing both their versions, House and Senate versions of the Compassionate Care Act. Uh, Neither of them, I mean, both of them, as far as I know, and my understanding, are for helping people in need medically, um, and that's as far as it goes. As you all know, our position at Normal, we are a primarily a civil rights, civil liberties organization. We see at minimum, what we're kind of looking for is decriminalization for simple possession. Stop locking people up. Stop ruining their lives. Stop making them check check the checkbox and all the other, additional consequences that come with having a marijuana conviction. um, Also, civil asset forfeiture, violation, of course, of the Fourth Amendment, to be securing your person and your papers and your possessions, that kind of thing. So, although I get some grief from some of our followers sometimes on, on their comments on our website, or should I say on our social media, um, it's not just about cannabis for normal. Keith Stroop, who founded the organization 50 years ago, uh, based it in the roots of the civil rights era. Um, and interesting, I was in on a conversation with him one day discussing that, um, like I say, it's not just about, oh, let's legalize it, or it's it's really the legalize it the right way, make sure that it's fair and just for citizens. One of the things that it's often discussed when we're talking about talking with our folks at National and the National chapter is that Normal is there for the people. We're not necessarily an organization. We're not an organization when we're advocating for reform on looking necessarily at how it benefits businesses. Um, in that side of it, we're looking at it on how does it benefit the citizen. How can we make it more beneficial to the citizen? Um, there are other organizations out there that are more focused on um, how businesses are going to interact and operate under legalization, and that's not necessarily exactly where normal's focus is. Ours is for the citizenry, the people, civil rights, civil liberties of this. So, of course, because it ties in with the war on drugs, the civil asset forfeiture is a big thing. Expungement is something that we're all about, clearing up people's records, making it fair for them in the workplace, in yeah, in housing, in education. I know I'm repeating myself, um, but that's kind of where I think our next moves have to be, because if, and to me, it's a real big if this bill happens to get moved forward by the Rules Committee and gets voted positively out of the Senate and makes it by the crossover deadline over to the House, we still have an uphill battle. And that's why I say it's a really big if. I don't see that happening. And I'm going to have to probably fall back to where I've been a number of times in our conversations, is how do we go ahead then and move forward and concentrate and focus on the decrim petitions that we have, the no fine, no time, no court cost decriminalization petitions. I really believe, and unfortunately, it's one of those situations that I don't see the medical marijuana advocacy groups participating and joining us and supporting. Is I really believe that decriminalization at the municipal level, town by town, city by city, across the state, is the only way we're really going to be able to get our legislators to hear us. They're going to all of a sudden one day turn around and say, well, geez, we've got this town, that town, and 20%, 30% of our population has decided to, vote to decriminalize their town. Um, I, I, I watched them do it in Pennsylvania. I was living in Pennsylvania 5+ years ago while they were in the process of doing it. A couple of years, maybe a year or two after I moved away, um, I'm not sure if I was still in Pennsylvania when Philadelphia actually did capital office, getting grief from the more conservative side because apparently there's some rules in the about hanging flags or whatever out of your capital office. So they had him taken down. So he hung some more. Um, I don't see um, McMaster, or geez, I don't even know who the lieutenant governor of our state is. I'm sorry. I should be more up on it. But I don't see that happening here in South Carolina anytime soon under the leadership that we have. But I think the only way, I think really the only way to get this stuff moving forward is to start making movement municipally. I'm getting dry again, excuse me. Again, I'd have to probably follow up with the folks that are a little closer to Tom Davis and some of the medical, as you all know, I'm probably referring to Jill on what happens now, because if this thing kind of doesn't move out of the Senate, my thought is it kind of dies for this session and would have to be then reread in or resubmitted. I'm guessing early submission in December and or read in as soon as session begins next January, which is Geez, I forget the second or the third Tuesday of the month. I think it's the third Tuesday of January. Um, yes, yes, and apparently, things are moving forward. I'm watching the comments here on Josh mentioned getting a bus and taking people up to Virginia. Um, that is going to be a thing soon. And I think it was supposed to be 2024 when the laws were kind of implemented and things like that. And now they're saying July 1st of this year, um, moving rather quickly, which is great for them. I don't see why they would have to wait. I think a lot of the infrastructure is already in place from their medical program. But sorry about that. But again, back to South Carolina. Um, I just don't see it with our legislators. Um, and I'm not sure how to move some of them. As a couple of people had commented in some of the comments about Humbry, I believe it is, Humbry, um, he probably doesn't have anybody close to him that benefits from cannabis, that's sick, that's ill. Um, and that's probably very true. From my experience, from my observations, it seems to be, um, especially from our more conservative legislators, that if there isn't somebody close to them in their family, uh, a loved one, they don't tend to come around. I guess, excuse me, is the word I'm looking for. Oh gosh, what was his name? Speaker of the House, John Boehner. Um, when he started talking about, no, we're talking again federal level, his thinking on it, his opinions have evolved. And again, what I see many times is with our more conservative legislators, their opinions on cannabis don't necessarily evolve until it hits home, until it really is someone close to them, um, and then then it's okay. Um, this is a war. You're right, and the war on drugs is a war on people. um, I was
He's having
actually,
cancer on me. I've been totally.
excuse me. I was actually very surprised to listen to Tom Davis in his uh, at the press conference that they did there in Columbia yesterday. Um, and there's a couple good links to it, I think, on the Compassionate Access Network. Uh, but he actually talked about how it was in 70. He said 72. Now, I may be a little off on my dates, but I'm thinking the Controlled Substances Act was pretty much implemented in 1970, by the Nixon administration. And I always like to quote John Ehrlichman, who was interviewed in 1996. And I'm not going to go into all of it, but basically saying that they knew that marijuana wasn't dangerous, but if they could, criminalize marijuana, associate the anti-war left with, or was it the anti-war hippie, something like that, with that, and then um, heroin with the blacks and flood the neighborhoods. Then they could go in and they could raid their homes. They could demonize them on the evening news. They could keep them from voting against us. And that to me, that kind of last line was a real big kicker. That really kind of signifies how much of a political kind of move it was. Is we're just going to lock them up and take away their right to vote, because they think differently, and we're going to. Uh, I don't want to get into too much conspiracy theory stuff, but yeah, I'd like to be curious how much of the drugs, especially in the 70s and 80s, were brought in by the CIA. How many today are still brought in by the CIA? Um, okay, now I'm just sounding crazy, right? um, but Tom Davis mentioned someone else, and I don't remember who it was, and he mentioned the year 1972. Now, what I'm thinking he may have been talking about was there was in 1970 when the Controlled Substances Act was first implemented. There was a requirement of a 2-year study into cannabis, and that was done by the Schaefer Commission, Schaefer Committee, Schaefer Commission. Uh, and 2 years later, the Schaefer Commission comes back and they says, you should just decriminalize it. There's really, not that big a deal. And Nixon went off and started one of his racist rants and, just said, I want it this way. It's going to be this way, completely ignoring science, completely ignoring this study. He wanted it illegal. He wanted to demonize the cannabis users. And if you look at our, the history of the racial disparity in marijuana arrests throughout the decades, it kind of holds true. I think it's not only racially, it's also financially. I mean, you're as much a minority many times if you're poor. Um, although if you're poor and a person of color, you're at even more detriment. Um, anyway, that's a lot of why we do what we do is to fight that racial disparity in arrests and arrests, to fight the unconstitutional again searches and seizures. I think I smell marijuana, and then nothing's found. My dog marked for marijuana, and 80% of the time nothing's found. Um, so you have to kind of question the honesty and truthfulness of our enforcement agencies and our justice department. And I don't want to, you know, just point the finger at local enforcement and that kind of thing. It's systemic. It goes all the way to the top of the Justice Department. And so when you talk about uh, I'm sorry, I include judges with that many at a time. So the warrants that are often written for these no knock raids. It's another thing we're against, no knock raids. Um, you know, there's just very frustrating. So there's a lot more we can do, and decriminalizing to me is one of the very a key element in criminal justice reform. I'm not quite sure why nobody else seems to be hollering that same kind of message. That's also why when we're looking forward to our potential of July event, it's going to surround around those civil rights, civil liberties type of subject, and see what we can do to sort of highlight that and to um, you know connect with other nonprofits and see if we can sort of come up with a coalition, if you will, of sharing that decriminalization is as important as legalizing for medical purposes. The harm that comes from the criminalization to 36,000 people in 2018 here in South Carolina is devastating, um, and we need to work on that. So um, I'm just going to cross my fingers and find my lucky 4-leaf clover and write the rules committee and hope that something happens by Friday end of session. Um, Otherwise, I'm going to say, hey, Josh, where's the bus? Let's go to Virginia. I just want to read comments here real quick. All right. Um, Real quick peek at the time. We're at about 20 of 8. So we've chit chatted about 35, 40 minutes here. Um, that's kind of what I got. I'm not sure if I've even gave any kind of closure for tonight's conversation. Uh, but that's kind of, I think, where we are is we're up in the air on what's going on with the Compassionate Care Act. I really have my doubts that it's going to move forward by Friday, the crossover date. Hammer, hammer, hammer at that Senate Rules Committee, and maybe, with our fingers all crossed and such like that, maybe we'll get a majority of them to vote to move this forward, and maybe it'll be positively voted out of the Senate by Friday. Um, and in the meantime, I'll start putting together some information on, I think, how we can move forward with our decriminalization petitions. I have 3 of them already drafted for some local area right here around Charleston. These things are challenging, and we can go into some of the details with that if you like, but for the most part, um, you collect signatures on petitions, and they need to be physical signatures, and the signatures must be from registered voters that are residents of the municipality that you're collecting signatures for on that specific petition. Um, so, good example is here in Charleston. We also happen to be in Charleston County. I have some Charleston petitions. I need 15% of the registered voters to sign this petition. And I happen to go to some big event, happen to be like a radio station rock festival. And I would ask people before they sign the petition, are you a resident of the city of Charleston? And I would get so many people, yeah, yeah, of course, over the loud music. I'm not sure how well they heard me or not. And they would sign the petition and they would wander off. And I'd look down and they were from a nearby town, maybe even in the county of Charleston, but they weren't city of Charleston residents. And those are invalid signatures. The signatures, once they're collected and you get the number that you think you're supposed to have, plus some for buffer, I would assume, you turn those all into the Board of Voter Registration Board. And then they go through and they confirm all of those signatures and addresses that you've collected that they're registered voters. And then if you have your 15%, at that point, then the initiative can be put on the ballot, the next ballot for that particular municipality. And then there's, of course, the campaign to let people know to get out the vote and vote for this ordinance and decriminalize that particular municipality, um, and hope they do. 50% plus one, and it becomes an ordinance. We have then watched that try to be blocked at a number of places throughout the country. Um, and in general, though, that is the only legal method we have to change the laws as voters. Because as y'all are seeing right now, and I know we're watching, I know you're watching, is our legislators, they're not there for us. We all know that on average, 70% of the voters, that's across the aisle. That's both Democratic and Republican register. Well, you don't register as one or the other here in the state, but people identifying as either Republicans or Democrats um, are 70%. On average, it might be slightly higher on the Democratic side than the Republican side, but the Republican side has definitely been growing over the past few years. I know we have a very strong number of our followers uh, that are Republicans and that are supportive of medical marijuana. Um, some are, and many are. I'm gonna stick my neck out a little bit. Many are in favor of full legalization of ending prohibition, both at federal level and state level, which is taking it a step above and beyond decriminalization. Decriminalization is one thing. It's still illegal. All you can do in a decriminalization ordinance is to affect the penalty phase of the law at state level. And the state level, it's illegal, possess up to a, under an ounce or up to an ounce of marijuana. And then even more penalties if it's over that amount. Um, and so you can decriminalize, and all that does, it affects the penalty phase. Um, and so again, if you move forward with that, and enough voters say yes, this is what we want, but that's tough. That's tough. I mean, the reasons I've heard people won't sign our petitions also often, I think that folks are a little bit paranoid. I'm not sure if I blame them sometimes, but they're like, I don't want my name to go on some list. They're worried about, the government eye watching over them, or as I talk about often on here, pre-employment drug testing is a way to discriminate against cannabis consumers, and it will show full spectrum CBD products will pop as marijuana use, um, because they're only testing for cannabinoid metabolites. They're not actually testing for impairment. They're not testing for active THC, molecules in your system. Um, but uh, again, this is probably the first step, and that's where the difference is between the decriminalization and the legalization. Once it becomes legalized, whether it's for medical and or for adult use, uh, employers are going to have to start looking at it a little bit differently, because then it's a bit of an invasion of your privacy and your medical history, if they're testing for cannabis. So we've seen a lot of the states that have moved forward with medical, um, stop the smell of marijuana being a reason to search your car, stop the pre-employment drug testing for cannabinoids. Um, things are move forward in that direction with decriminalization, and then the legalization for medical. Um, there were, I think, at least three. I don't have my notes necessarily in front of me. 3, 4. I'm showing decriminalization bills that were one in the Senate, 3 in the House. One of the ones in the House, 3228, had like over 30 co-sponsors on it. It was a democratically sponsored bill, and a majority of those signers were Democrats in a Republican-controlled House. And when you have a Republican control, when you have whoever's in the majority, they get seated as the chairs of the committees. The chairs of the committees decide what moves forward and what doesn't move forward. That gives them a fair amount of power on, what legislation is going to move forward and what isn't. So when you have a Republican controlled legislature, as we have here, both House and Senate, and a Democrat decides to sponsor a bill, and a whole bunch of other Democrats decide to sign that bill, and it gets to committee, it I think it was assigned to committee. I don't know if it was ever actually acknowledged and like accepted by the committee. But again, that's the choice that they have as the chairperson in that of those committees. Um, and so not a single one of the decrim bills moved forward. I don't know what the exact numbers are, because the surveys don't ask, do you think that we should decriminalize simple possession of marijuana in South Carolina? They're always asking, do you think doctors should be able to, I think they say prescribe on a lot of the surveys here in South Carolina, but recommend is really more the case, cannabis in South Carolina. Um, so I don't know what the exact numbers are, and the numbers to decrim are probably a little less than the 70%, or sometimes even 80, depending on the polls you're listening to, um, for the medical legalization. But I would assume still for simple possession decriminalization, I wouldn't doubt the numbers are definitely over 50% and probably over 60%. Uh, and that's really important to me, the decriminalization aspect of it. I'm going to wrap up here in a couple minutes. I see I've been rambling here. Um, But this is real kind of important to me because even if we pass medical legislation here in South Carolina, that's really only going to help the people that can afford to get their medical card, and that can afford to go to the doctor and have it taken care of, be checked out, get the documentation they need. Sandy Sanders, for one, as well as some of our other legislators, are very concerned that people are going to fake their ailments and fake their pain, and be getting this, devil's lettuce. Jazz cabbage is actually my preferred um, nickname. Um, uh, so we have an uphill battle, and again, those legislators are not going to move forward even on decriminalization. So I think our only way, maybe I'm optimistic, but I think our only way is if we can get the voters to do it. If we can get them to put their signature on there and say, damn the, being on a list. I think many of them are often worried about retribution and retaliation by their employers. I've actually heard it where people are saying, "Oh, don't get involved with that cannabis group if you want to keep your job," that kind of thing. Um, Surprise test, when people visit Colorado, or things like that. So, people, I guess, are rightfully afraid in some circumstances to support here in South Carolina. A number of people have become refugees to other states, where they could go. They've moved out of South Carolina to a legal state so that they could have their medicine and not worry about losing their employment. Not people are worried about losing their children. Uh, there's a lot of detriment in South Carolina here, because they're just so backwards on their legislation with cannabis. So that's where we are. Any thoughts, advice, suggestions on how to move it forward? I would really love to hear it. Last but not least, I will kind of mention that we're finalizing, well, not finalizing per se, but um, flushing out our format for the July 10th South Carolina Cannabis Convocation. It's a convention and mini trade show concept. Again, focusing pretty much on the civil rights, civil aspects, and nonprofits in the area that have clients that are affected by marijuana arrests. Um, we'll keep you posted on that. Um, hopefully, we'll have some finalized details on that by next Wednesday. That's all I have for tonight. I say Griffin for governor 2022. Um, I don't know. We might have to double check the rest of his references, make sure there's no inappropriateness in his past. Sorry, I've been watching too much of the news with Matt Getz lately. Um, but anyway, vote for Josh. And thank you all for joining me. Josh is good. Um, Michael, we're pushing for this. We want it for all of our citizens, but we're definitely pushing for medical. I'm just kind of really losing my faith for the atheist in his faith. I'm losing faith on our legislative process here in South Carolina to get this move forward. This contested thing totally blindsided me. I'm not that well versed. I mean, I'm a high school graduate. I've got no law background. So, I apologize for my lack of knowledge on some of this stuff and how it works. But that definitely kind of caught me off guard, caught me by surprise. So, last thing I'll have is to, just remind you, contact that Senate Rules Committee in the next day, hammer them, see if we can move this forward. Otherwise, that's all I have for you tonight. Thank you for joining me. I will be back, barring any complications, next Wednesday at 7 p.m. If you need to contact us, visit our website at normalsc.org. Also, we're on Facebook way more than we're supposed to be. And also, we post to Twitter and Instagram, although we don't keep watching of those as closely as we should. Don't forget to go over to YouTube and subscribe to our channel. In case you ever do miss these meetings and you want to sit down for an hour and have a reason to fall asleep, you can watch one of these videos. And last but not least, if you do go to our website, normalsc.org, scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll see a spot where you can sign up for our monthly newsletter, which generally comes out the just before the third Tuesday of the month, just before our monthly meeting. That's all I have for you tonight. Thank you for joining me. We'll see you right back here next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Bye bye now. Thanks.